Hey everyone, we're back with the two Joshuas from Crime Stoppers of Houston and Parent ProTech. We're talking about some of the top tech questions and legal questions relating to tech that we get. And today we're looking at sexting. Now, sexting, put simply, this is the sending of nude, semi-nude, or suggestive photos or even messages, videos back and forth between other people. And when we look at the data, nearly 17%, this comes from a 2020 survey, nearly 17% of students 15 and older say that they have sent or received a nude or sexual photo of themselves. And we hear this more and more with AI tools and lots of the tools that are out there now. When we think about sexting and sending sexually explicit photos, videos, messages, it's so important that consent is at play, especially when we're thinking about minors and we get into questions of child pornography, child CSAM, things like that. Joshua, could you talk about that consent piece?
You hit the nail on the head, right? Whether we're talking about electronic transmission of sexual material, in-person interactions, consent is key to all of that. But I think when you get cell phones and the internet and social media and the ability to contact and communicate with people literally all over the world, the boundaries can get a little fuzzy and a little bit hard to know what somebody might be comfortable with, especially if an interaction is happening entirely online, right? Those little body language cues that can help us determine if somebody's really into what we're saying or doing, we can miss that.
Hmm.
And so as we have, young people transmitting, sending, and receiving these sexually suggestive images back and forth, we have to, number one, understand the laws around age of consent, but as you talked about, just consent in general. Does the person want to see this image that we're sending them? And if
Hmm.
not, here in Texas, that is a crime. It is
Hmm.
illegal to send someone a sexually explicit picture, video without them consenting. Unfortunately, that is something that we see all the time. You hear, unfortunately, often these unsolicited pictures that
Yeah.
oftentimes women may be on the receiving end of, but men as well. And so we have had to put that into law, kind of codify that to make people aware of the fact that you need consent, whether we're talking about in-person sexual activity, the transmission of internet images, whatever it is, the other person has to want that to happen. And if that consent isn't there, that's a crime.
And what about minors as well? I know in the past I've heard that when those 18 and under send these, that could be considered CSAM or uh, and how does consent, how does the law, if two high school students, two middle school students are sexting with each other, what does the law have to say about that?
Yeah, Joshua, I think that's a really crucial thing to talk about because we know sexting is common amongst kids and teenagers. If they have cell phones, if they have boyfriend, girlfriends, even just people that they've met online, there is oftentimes the urge, the pressure to send these kinds of images. But knowing that, yeah, if they are under the age of consent here in the state of Texas at 17, sending,
Hmm.
transmitting, receiving, even possessing images of somebody under the age of 18, that is technically child pornography. Now, if you have two teenagers that are within 3 years of age and they have both consented to the exchanging of these materials, and crucially, if those materials only stay between them, right? So you have boyfriend, girlfriend, whomever, sending pictures, as long as it doesn't go outside of them, there is a little bit of grace, right? It is still
Hmm.
illegal, but there are protections in place specifically for teenagers who are probably in a relationship sending pictures back and forth. So it does protect students, protect families, but still, right, we have to have these conversations around not only the legality of it, but the long lasting consequences. You never know how long you're going to last with this person. This relationship may not last forever.
Yeah.
And we've seen so many cases of once that relationship is over, those pictures get posted online, sent to friends, what have you. And so, if again, they are together, that's legal, but we have to talk about what happens afterwards, right? And I think that is the real concern, one of the major concerns.
What you're highlighting is even for something to be allowed in this sense, there's still there is a lot of caveats and a lot of um, there's a lot of other details and information that law enforcement might take into account when looking at things like this, which I think the takeaway for me, and I hope for students and families that might see this, is hey, before I share or receive or save or distribute anything of this nature, I really need to think twice.
Right. And because your boyfriend, girlfriend might be okay with it, but are their parents, right? The parents can still choose to press charges if they want to, right? So
Mm.
again, just because you have the two teenagers that have consented to this, if the parents are uncomfortable with it, which by all means they might be, there are still consequences that exist. So yeah, my advice, just don't do it. Just don't do it. Find other ways to build a relationship and get to know your partner that aren't exchanging these really sensitive pictures and videos that could come back to haunt us later.
Quote of the day, just don't do it. I
Just a
love
note.
it. I love it. And when we think about digital footprint, it's something we talk about a lot. But even there was a study the Internet Watch Foundation did, and they were looking at a lot of the CSAM that is available on the internet. And they found that in a quarter of a million web pages that had this, about 3/4 of those images, that CSAM was self-generated. And by self-generated, I mean that the image was taken by the person in the photo and then passed along, and eventually got in the wrong hands. Joshua, I think we've made the case for the just don't do it side of things,
Right.
but the reality is a lot of students and young adults are sharing these images. So what about our I don't want to say best practices, but if someone is determined to do this,
Yeah.
what would you say to them?
Right. So my message, and this is primarily for college students, young adults, right?
Yeah.
If you are deciding to send these images, making sure that we are doing what we can to protect our identity and our safety. So that means not putting our faces in the images, for example.
Yeah.
Making sure that we scan the background to make sure no identifiable information, name, school name, home address, none of that information is visible in the background, because you have seen so many instances of people being found just off of the most minor details that somebody overlooked as they were posting an image. And so for my adults that are choosing to engage in this kind of behavior, making sure that, again, we are protecting our identity, our personal information, and not sending anything that somebody could use to find us and potentially harm us.
That's exactly it, Joshua. And the reality is, once we receive an image like this or take one, once it's in our possession, we have a responsibility. And once that gets shared with others, if that's sent or distributed in any way, there can be serious consequences.
Absolutely. And even consequences that we may not ever foresee or anticipate at all. So, yeah, just speaking to the importance of thinking twice and probably deciding not to do it at all.